They thought your kindness was weakness. They thought your patience meant permission. They thought your silence meant surrender. They looked at the way you carried other people's pain, the way you gave second chances, the way you searched for understanding instead of revenge, and they made a fatal mistake. They underestimated what lives inside an empath who has finally reached the limit. An empath is not weak. An empath is not fragile. An empath is not someone who lacks power. An empath is someone who chooses restraint when power is available. That is a very different thing. For years you listened when nobody listened to you. You stood beside people when they were falling apart. You carried conversations, relationships, responsibilities, and burdens that were never supposed to belong to you alone. You gave people the benefit of the doubt long after the evidence had disappeared. You fought for people who would never fight for you. You believed in people after they had stopped believing in themselves. And what happened? Some appreciated it, some respected it, but others saw it as an opportunity. They took and took and took. They expected your forgiveness before they even apologized. They expected your loyalty while offering none of their own. They expected your understanding while making no effort to understand you. They became comfortable crossing boundaries because every time they crossed one, you chose peace over conflict. Every time they pushed, you absorbed the impact. Every time they demanded more, you found a way to give more. And slowly, without realizing it, they convinced themselves that your strength was weakness. That was their mistake. Because there is something they never understood. The empath sees everything. The empath notices everything. The empath feels what others ignore. You notice the shift in tone, the hidden agenda, the fake smile, the contradiction between words and actions. You see the cracks beneath the surface long before anyone else sees them. You knew you always knew. You knew who was genuine. You knew who was pretending. You knew who respected you. You knew who was using you. You simply hoped they would choose to become better. That hope is often mistaken for blindness. It is not blindness. It is patience. And patience has limits. There comes a moment when the person who has endured the most becomes the person who tolerates the least. There comes a moment when the heart that stayed open through every storm decides that access is no longer free. There comes a moment when the empath stops asking, stops explaining, stops negotiating, and starts walking away. That moment changes everything, because the most dangerous transformation is not when someone becomes angry. It is when someone becomes clear. Anger is temporary. Clarity is permanent. The empath who reaches clarity no longer wastes energy proving their worth. They no longer chase approval. They no longer beg for respect. They no longer shrink themselves to make other people comfortable. They understand something powerful. Not everyone deserves access to their heart. Not everyone deserves their energy. Not everyone deserves another chance. And when that realization arrives, an entirely different person emerges. The people who took advantage of you will not recognize this version. The people who ignored your value will suddenly notice your absence. The people who thought you would always be there will discover what life feels like when you are gone. Not because you seek revenge, not because you want them to suffer, but because your energy is no longer available for those who refuse to respect it. That is the part they never expected. They expected endless forgiveness. They expected unlimited access. They expected permanent availability. What they never expected was consequence. What they never expected was distance. What they never expected was silence. And silence from an empath can be louder than any argument, because when an empath finally leaves, they do not leave impulsively. They leave after countless attempts to fix what was broken. They leave after exhausting every possibility. They leave after giving more chances than most people would ever give. And when they leave with certainty. The world often celebrates loud strength, the strength that dominates, the strength that intimidates, the strength that demands attention. But there is another kind of strength. The strength that survives betrayal without becoming bitter. The strength that remains kind in a cruel environment. The strength that keeps moving forward despite disappointment. The strength that chooses growth over revenge. That strength lives inside every empath. And once it awakens fully, it becomes unstoppable. You stop measuring your worth through the opinions of people who never valued you. You stop carrying responsibilities that belong to others. You stop apologizing for having standards. You stop shrinking your voice. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop negotiating with people committed to misunderstanding you. And something remarkable happens. Your energy returns, your confidence returns, your focus returns, your future returns. The weight you carried for years begins to fall away. You realize that peace is not found by keeping everyone happy. Peace is found by remaining true to yourself. You realize that being compassionate does not require self-sacrifice. You realize that protecting your energy is not selfish. You realize that boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks, and you decide who gets a key. So, if someone broke your trust, let them learn what your absence feels like. If someone mocked your kindness, let them discover what life is like without it. If someone mistook your patience for weakness, let them witness your strength from a distance. You do not need revenge. You do not need validation. You do not need permission. You need clarity. You need self-respect. You need the courage to recognize your value, even when others refuse to see it, because the truth is simple. They did not break you. They revealed you. They revealed the strength you had not yet fully claimed. They revealed the standards you needed to enforce. They revealed the power you had been hiding behind endless understanding. And now the person standing before the world is no longer the version that tolerated everything. This version knows their worth. This version knows their boundaries. This version knows their power. And that is why the people who underestimated you made the biggest mistake of their lives. They thought they broke an empath. What they really did was awaken one. And an awakened empath is not driven by anger. An awakened empath is driven by purpose, not by revenge, by vision, not by resentment, by self-respect, not by fear, by truth. So stand tall. Protect your peace. Honor your value. Guard your energy. And remember this, the moment you stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of others is the moment your real life begins. They thought they were destroying your spirit. Instead, they forged it. They thought they were writing your ending. Instead, they were witnessing your beginning. They broke the wrong empath. There is a truth that most people never learn until life forces it upon them. The people who cause the deepest wounds are rarely strangers. Strangers do not have access to your heart. Strangers do not know your fears. Strangers do not know your dreams. The deepest wounds come from those who were invited into your world, the ones who heard your stories, the ones who knew your struggles, the ones who saw your loyalty, the ones who understood exactly how much you cared. That is why betrayal feels different. It is not simply the loss of trust. It is the realization that someone was fully aware of your value and chose not to honor it. For an empath, that realization can feel devastating. Not because you are weak, but because you genuinely believed in the good within people. You saw potential where others saw problems. You saw possibilities where others saw limitations. You saw humanity where others saw flaws. You believed that understanding could heal almost anything. You believed that patience could change almost anyone. You believed that enough love could repair what was broken. Then reality arrived. Reality taught you that some people do not want healing. Some people want convenience. Some people do not want growth. Some people want control. Some people do not value kindness. They simply exploit it. That lesson is painful, but it is also powerful because once you understand the difference between helping someone and enabling someone, your entire life changes. You stop rescuing people from consequences they created. You stop carrying responsibilities that never belonged to you. You stop feeling guilty for saying no. You stop believing that your purpose is to save everyone around you. You begin to understand that your purpose is not to sacrifice yourself. Your purpose is to become yourself. There is a huge difference. For years, many empaths live as emotional firefighters, running from crisis to crisis, solving problems that are not theirs, absorbing stress that does not belong to them, trying to keep everyone emotionally comfortable, trying to prevent conflict, trying to maintain harmony. trying to earn appreciation, trying to prove their worth. And in the process, they forget something important. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot heal while constantly bleeding. You cannot build a meaningful future while carrying everyone else's unfinished past. At some point, something has to change. At some point, the empath must make a decision that feels uncomfortable at first, a decision that may disappoint people, a decision that may upset those who benefited from unlimited access, the decision to choose yourself, not out of selfishness, out of necessity. Because every strong person eventually discovers that self-respect is not optional. It is required. The world will often reward what you tolerate. Think about that. If you tolerate disrespect, you receive more disrespect. If you tolerate manipulation, you receive more manipulation. If you tolerate dishonesty, you receive more dishonesty. People learn how to treat you by observing what you allow. The moment you understand that, your standards begin to rise. And when your standards rise, your life changes. Some people will disappear. Let them. Some people will complain. Let them. Some people will call you different. They are right. You are different. You are no longer willing to betray yourself to maintain relationships that were draining your spirit. You are no longer willing to accept crumbs when you deserve a seat at the table. You are no longer willing to shrink your voice to protect someone else's ego. Growth always creates distance between who you were and who you are becoming. That distance can feel lonely, but loneliness and alignment are not the same thing. Sometimes the loneliest seasons produce the strongest versions of you. Sometimes isolation becomes preparation. Sometimes silence becomes training. Sometimes loss becomes freedom in disguise. The people around you may not understand the transformation. That is okay. Transformation was never designed for spectators. It was designed for the person experiencing it. The caterpillar does not ask permission before becoming a butterfly. The seed does not seek approval before becoming a tree, and you do not need validation before becoming who you were meant to be. Your growth does not require consensus. Your healing does not require applause. Your future does not require permission. The strongest people eventually stop asking whether everyone approves. They start asking a different question. Am I being honest with myself? That question changes everything. Because when you answer honestly, excuses disappear. Fear loses power. Masks begin to fall. Pretending becomes exhausting. Authenticity becomes necessary. And the empath who once spent years understanding everyone else finally begins understanding themselves. That is where true power begins. Not in controlling others, not in winning arguments, not in proving people wrong. Real power begins when your inner world becomes stronger than outside opinions, when criticism no longer defines you, when rejection no longer destroys you, when disappointment no longer stops you. When your identity is built from within instead of borrowed from others. That kind of strength cannot be taken away. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be controlled because it was earned through heartbreak, earned through struggle, earned through betrayal, earned through resilience. Every challenge that was meant to break you became training. Every disappointment became education. Every setback became preparation. And slowly, without realizing it, you became stronger than the circumstances that once intimidated you. That is the irony. The people who tried to weaken you often become part of the reason you become powerful. The obstacles become teachers. The betrayals become lessons. The losses become redirections. The pain becomes fuel. Not fuel for revenge, fuel for growth. Because revenge keeps you connected to the past. Growth carries you into the future. And the future belongs to those who learn, adapt, and continue moving forward. So stop measuring your life by who left. Start measuring it by who you became after they left. Stop focusing on closed doors. Focus on the strength you developed while standing in front of them. Stop replaying old betrayals. Start building new possibilities. Your story was never meant to end with disappointment. Your story was never meant to end with heartbreak. Your story was never meant to end with someone else's opinion of your worth. The next chapter belongs to you, not to those who underestimated you, not to those who doubted you, not to those who used you, to you. And when you finally embrace that truth, something extraordinary happens. The victim disappears, the survivor emerges, then the survivor evolves. And eventually, the survivor becomes the creator of new standards, the creator of new boundaries, the creator of a new future, the creator of a life built on self-respect instead of self-sacrifice. That is the moment everything changes, because the world is full of people waiting for permission to become who they already are. Do not be one of them. Become the person your younger self needed. Become the example your future self will thank you for. Become the proof that pain does not have the final word. And never forget this: the same heart that made you vulnerable also made you powerful. The same sensitivity that exposed you to pain also gave you wisdom. The same empathy that others tried to exploit became the source of your greatest strength. They saw kindness and assumed weakness. They saw patience and assumed submission. They saw compassion and assumed fragility. They were wrong, because what they failed to recognize was that beneath every act of kindness was courage. Beneath every act of patience was discipline. Beneath every act of compassion was strength. And now that strength is fully awake. Now that strength has direction. Now that strength has boundaries. Now that strength has purpose. The person they once underestimated no longer needs to prove anything. The evidence is already visible. You survived, you learned, you grew, you rose, and you are just getting started. There comes a point in every empath's journey when the pain stops asking questions. For years, you ask why. Why did they lie? Why did they leave? Why did they betray the trust you gave so freely? Why did they take your loyalty for granted? Why did they keep hurting the very person who was trying to help them? You replay conversations, you replay moments, you replay memories, matching for answers, matching for explanations, searching for something that will make it all make sense. But eventually, something shifts. You realize that understanding their behavior does not erase the damage it caused. You realize that having empathy for someone's wounds does not excuse what they did with those wounds. You realize that compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. And that realization changes everything, because the strongest version of an empath is not the one who understands everyone. The strongest version is the one who understands everyone and still knows when to walk away. That takes courage. Real courage. Not the courage people celebrate in movies. Not the courage that receives applause. The quiet courage. The courage to leave familiar pain. The courage to disappoint people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. The courage to choose uncertainty instead of guaranteed suffering. The courage to say, I deserve better, even when a part of you is afraid to believe it. Many people stay trapped because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. Think about that. People will remain in relationships that drain them, jobs that destroy them, environments that diminish them. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because suffering becomes predictable. And predictable feels safe. Freedom, on the other hand, requires faith. Freedom requires stepping into the unknown. Freedom requires trusting yourself. That is why so many people never reach it. But you are different. Not because you are fearless, because you finally became tired of betraying yourself.